Welcome to part 3 of the tutorial series on how to create maps for UT2004. In the last two tutorials we already covered the basics of creating a level, creating some basic shapes, adding your first light, adding your play start, so on and so on. But now it's actually time to play with some lighting instead, because, well, um, the old map was just one simple light and that was it. And there's so much more stuff you can do with lighting in UT2004. So I created this little map. You can use the old one if you want as well, but I created a map specifically to show off some things. If you want, you can recreate it by subtracting 4 cubes like so, making like 4 hallways in between, because these are like the 4 hallways. Of course, add a zone info to each room. You can add any mesh you want, but I want to use the fence here from 1 sec. It's actually from a level, so I just nicked it from a level. And there's a mesh here that's from Raham, Raynham Glacier Base Close Box Lit 3, or Box Box 3, whatever. But yeah, it doesn't really matter. You can create whatever you want, but I'm going to use this map to show off some basic lighting. Yeah, there's a few different types of light in the game. You will find the one that you already know how to place by right-clicking and saying add a light here. That will create a basic light like so, just a room filling light. It irradiates light in every direction. But it's also like different types. So if you go to your actor browser again, you go to light. You can ignore these ones because these ones are used by the onslaught vehicles, so they're not in use. You have a spotlight, you have a sunlight, and a triggered light. I haven't found really working yet, so if somehow I find that working, that would be covered in an advanced tutorial on lighting. But for now, we will focus on the normal light, what you can do with that, and the spotlight. So coming back to the normal light, which we have in this starting room, which indicated by our player start here. If you double click on it or right click and then go to properties, you will get the little editor box or the property box. In here you can change quite a few things. What you can do is change the color, obviously. So let's say this room is too bright, so let's set it from 64 to like 32. And you will notice it will be a lot darker, but you also notice the shadows are gone now, because every time you make a change to a light or like any of the options, then the lighting data gets removed and needs to be recalculated, which can be done by a little light bulb up in the top. So you will rebuild your lighting. What you can also do is only change the changed lighting. So if I change it to 128 and I don't want to rebuild everything because this one builds all lighting. So if you have a really big map, it will take a while. Well, on modern machines, it's fine. But so let's say you only change one light here and not the one that's back there. Then you only want to change the lighting here. And then this one will remain the same because it has not been changed. So it will only change, as the name indicates, changed lighting. So this one has been changed, this one will be rebuilt. The other one that is right here has not been changed and will not therefore not be recalculated. And the old data that it has will be reused. So let's turn it back to like, you can go to a max of 255. That's the max that it will allow you to go. So let's set back to like 64 again. Oh, that's 65. 64. Let's quickly build the lighting again. Only the change lighting in this case. Yeah, what you can do is you can pick a color. So it's white now. But for example, I want a red scene with some different type of hue, like more like going to mm, like dark red maybe. And then press OK, and you will see it's basically red now. But once again, the lighting needs to be rebuilt for it to actually like make changes. So you will see it's quite bright because yeah, for some reason, I don't know why, maybe it's an option in here. No. For some reason, I don't know why, when you pick a color, it will max out the light brightness again. So let's set it back to 64, and there we go. That's a lot more ambient, I would say. Yeah, you will notice that the colors are also applied to static meshes. So static meshes get also lighting information from a light source as well. So they will turn slightly red, as you can see. Um, Geometry slash BSP, depends how you want to pronounce it, but they're both the same. Also get lighting information from the light, so they also have a red glow. Um, you will notice the light is in the middle, so it basically goes out each direction, and you will notice there's a shadow here, or like a light beam that's being cast from this hallway into this room. And it actually bounces some lighting around. It's ray tracing, but not like, oh my god, it's ray tracing. Yeah, it is ray tracing, but it's not real time. So what you do when you press the build button, the lighting button, you're actually ray tracing the whole lighting and then baking it out to a texture basically. So yeah, in the end, you're like ray tracing, but it's not real time. So it's like static basically. But yeah, it creates it does a few bounces. It's like it does bounce around slightly, but as you can see, not like a whole lot. And yeah, you can also like see it will bleed into the different rooms. This one it doesn't because there's no like way it would affect that. But as you can see, like both of them have lights moving into those zones. You can block lighting um, like from moving from one of these zones by creating a sheet, which is this button right here. And let's rotate it around, and just for simplicity's sake, just plonk it right here in the middle. Make sure it's actually aligned somewhat. Of course, when you actually want to do this for real, you should line it up. Let's do it for real then, just perfectly. So there's like, looks like a sort of door, and just add a brush, or just add to it. And you will see we added a brush. We added some geometry to the map. You can move it around obviously, but we don't want to do that. We want to keep it right there. And we build again, and you will see it stops. But now you're probably wondering, yeah, but that 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 makes sense. Yeah, of course, you're closing it off, correct? Yeah. So if you somehow still want um, to be able to go into the next room, but you don't want lighting to go there, what you can do is, this one is a bit broken, so I guess we'll roll with it. If you go into Special Brush, you right click on it. If the editor allows me to click on it. There we go. Left click, sorry. Let's quickly make the shape again. There we go. And what you want to do is a non-solid brush. So as the name implies, it's not solid, so you won't be able to walk into it. So it still should block lighting, and it does. So, but this thing will not be there when you can walk through this basically. So if you want to create like a hidden area, you can use this as well to like walk through it. And lighting will be blocked. Players won't be blocked. Um, so yeah, but just for convenience, I will create a non-solid brush and make it invisible. So if I add it again and build it again, then you'll notice it's still, the texture is still there, but when you play it, it's gone. But yes, you notice as well, the lighting is back. because it's visible. It's invisible, so the lighting will go through there. So to fix that is you'll see it's one side, so that's why it's probably won't be. It's two-sided, so that's good. So let's set it to invisible only one tick, and then it should stop. It doesn't. It should do that. Hmm, weird. Well, I guess forget about that. So if you want to stop that, that will probably most likely be covered in the next or a different tutorial then. Okay, so let's build it again. Let's get rid of that brush. So in the editor and in game as well, you have a few rendering modes that you can use to debug or visualize your game in different ways. So the ones we'll be talking about today are the dynamic mode, dynamic lighting mode, which we are in right now. I'll quickly go into full screen to actually show this a little bit better. So this shows the lighting and dynamic lighting as the name implies. At the top, you can choose a few ones. So the ones you want to use for this one is lighting only as well. So you will see it only shows the lighting. So you can see it's bouncing around to here, and here's a light, and there's some spilling over here as well. You can also see the shadows in a lot more detail because there's no texture overlaid on them. And you go to textured, which is basically unlit. So as you can see, there's no lighting at all, but you are able to see everything in a clear manner, which mostly gets used for when you're texturing. I personally barely use it because I like to texture with dynamic light on, but it can be handy if you don't have any lights yet and you actually want to see inside of your map. Because if I create a box, let's quickly exit that again, the screen. So let's create a box, and as you know from the first tutorial, by default the box is black because there's no lighting. As you can see, there's a box here, but yeah, nothing is visible because there's no light in it. But you can actually start working it when you set it to on texture or texture mode slash unlit mode. So that's nice to know. We'll switch back to dynamic light because we actually want to see the lighting that we use. Um, yeah, I think there's a few more things to cover in the lights maybe. Let's see. Yeah, there is a light cone that can be changed, but for this type of light, the room filling light per se, this one is not used. Lighting effects are broken, which they don't work. You can see they will do something, but they're not, they don't work for some reason. There are other tricks to get them working, but yeah, that's you can ignore this one basically. Always set to none. Light period and stuff is also tied to the effect, so you can ignore these as well. Light radius is used to, well, obviously control the radius of the light. By default, 64. Um, you can actually see how far light goes by going into mode, no, sorry, actors, and then a radial view. And that's not the one I was looking for. I thought there was a way to check that. Guess I must have been mistaking it with something else. Well, that's a shame then. Um, Apparently there's no way to see. There might be, but I'll have to check it out. So let's set it to like 4 instead, and you will see the radius is so small it doesn't even touch anything. So if I set it to 16, the radius is a lot smaller. Maybe if I set it through here, maybe? No, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, yes, it does. Oh, okay, it is visible, but that's still, nah, that doesn't seem right. I think that's something else. Yeah, it is. Hmm. Okay, so when you set your actor to radial view, you can actually see the radius of the light. But yeah, since it's pretty small, and there's not enough light intensity, I think. No, it doesn't touch the walls nor the ceiling, I think. So if we grab a side view and do the same thing, you will see it barely touches the ground, but it's not touching it enough to actually like radiate light onto it. So let's go back to the lighting tab and then set this to like 6, and you will see it finally is the surface is encapsulated into the radius. This means it's actually able to shine light on it. So let's set it back to 32 or 64. 32 works. Let's set the color back to 60, brightness to 64 again. Build the lighting. And this way you can check how far your light will go. And as in real life, a light will decrease in brightness the further you go away from the source because, well, that's how light works. So if you would start a light here, as you can see here, it will taper off more and more, but that's more because there's like a hallway here, so it's not able to shine freely, basically. Okay. Um, yeah, there's also some thing called a corona. And yeah, coming from the pandemic, that might sound a little bit weird, but it's a light corona basically. So it's like a sort of lens flare effect that you can attach to a light. So for example, I want to attach a corona to this light. I can go into the properties again, go to corona, set the rotation is fine. The minimal be set to like 10. And let's quickly check. Um, if you want to add a corona, you should go to display and then skins. So it's right here. And then you want to navigate to it to your texture browser, open the package, and the package is called Epic Particles. And there are some flares in here. And there should be soft flare, basically, this one. Or you can also grab these ones. We'll go with this one. And then select it in the browser. So select it and then hit add and then use. And I think it will show up in the editor, I think. You still need to enable them as well. So we set it up, we set a minimal draw scale, and we now need to enable it. And here we go. You will see like a big glow, big corona, light corona around the light. So you can control the size because it's 100 now. You can also set it like pretty big, but then again, you set the minimal and the maximum to this is pretty big. This is not what you want, obviously, but so you set a minimum size. So the further you move away, the bigger it gets. So that's how that works. So you can also change the corona gets its lighting from the light color. So if you would change the colors again to like green, it will change the corona with it. So you can see the light corona is now green instead of red. So that's pretty cool. So it gives you a little bit more effects, like a little more atmospheric view. Um, yeah, we talked about the radius thing. You still see it here. Let's turn it off. So if you want to turn it off or any other things, go to full actor view. One thing you want to keep in mind is if you have a really big room, so if you try to make a like a storage hall or something else on your level, try not to add like too many lights in the same area because every light is like calculated each time and it will, yeah, it would slow down your game. You're probably saying, yeah, but we have like modern PCs these days. Yes, we do, but Um, Regardless, just try and avoid like having 20 lights when it could also be covered by one, where you can just increase the radius. So what I suggest is if you like a big room, instead of like 20 different lights, like do maybe like 5 or 10, and then play with the radius a bit, see if it works well. Um, but yeah, try to avoid having too many lights because it will increase your map rendering time to build it basically because every light needs to be built, and it's just bad overall. So yeah, try to use the radius as much as you can, which is under the lighting tab. Um, yeah, let's talk about the um, different type of light that we have in this thing. So we talked about the regular light, so it's a room filling light, fills up the whole room with light, obviously casts some nice shadows. But in this room, I have a spotlight. And what this thing does by the name, it's a spotlight. So you point it into the direction that you want, and you can control it by holding down Shift and then moving with right mouse button left to right. You can control the arrow, and you can obviously move the actor itself if you want. But I'm gonna place it back, and you can also do the same thing from up here. So if you're in the top view, you can move it left to right, and from the front or from the side, you can move it up or down. So let's move it back and then build the lighting again, and you will see there's some nice shadows being cast. So it does meshes that have things like grates or like fences, and I think there's a special tag they need to know, or it's alpha tested. That could also be. So this is an alpha texture. An alpha texture is basically transparency. The engine is smart enough to know, hey, there's like gaps in between. I need to treat those gaps that as real holes, basically, because these are not like models. This is just a texture on a model. As you can see, there's no like physical polygons that actually make up the wiring. So it's actually pretty cool that the engine knows how to do that. Yeah, spotlight, almost the same thing as a regular light, but the only thing it doesn't, it now works that the light cone works because yeah, this is actually used for cone to actually light it up instead of everywhere else. So let's set it to like 32. And you will see the cone got a lot smaller. So where's the light again? Here we go. Now let's set it to like 256. Keep missing it. That's too high. So 255. And you will see the light cone got a lot bigger. It's covering a lot more of the room basically. So let's set it back to 64. And there you go. Yeah, we talked about the shadows already. Let's get cast on BSP or geometry. There are ways to influence the quality of the shadows. So if we go back to the room with the spotlight and increase its cone a bit again, so it lights up the whole area nicely, you will see that there's a pretty nice shadow. Like it actually makes sense that it's all here. What you can do is you can actually change how detailed a shadow is per surface, so per texture basically, or per area, because this is an area, this is an area. So yeah, how you do that is you right click on a texture slash surface, you go into the properties, and you go to the texture or pan, rotate, and scale option, and you have an option called light map right here. Currently it's set to 1, which is the lowest it will go. Lower equals higher quality, higher equals less quality. So if we set this to 256, keep an eye on this part, it will be basically gone because there's not enough texture detail to create a shadow basically. So normally it's set to 32, and you will get a vague idea of, yeah, there's actually something there. 4 is the best, but as you can see, it's still pretty bad. 1 is obviously the best, but does take a little bit longer to compile and will increase your map size. But yeah, I would suggest you play around with this number basically. If you think your area, your part of the map um, needs detailed shadows and anything lower or values of 4 are not good enough, then you can go lower to like 2 or 1. But if you don't see a lot of changes, which I will show off now in this other room. So these ones are set to 4. You can see the shape is pretty well defined, the cone. So if we keep an eye on this area and set it to 1 and then rebuild, sure, there is a difference, but it's yeah, it's something you need to outweigh the extra time needed to render a map and the increased size of the map for the quality that you get back. For areas that are not visible for the player, either or like less detailed areas should use obviously less detailed. There we go. um, Light map resolutions. So like a flat wall with nothing on it can be 256. Yeah, it will show a bit some weird like if you think it's fine, then you can leave it, but 32 does at least a decent job. And if you have areas that are like um, outside, so you have like um, a fence or something else, like an area like this. Where's the fence gone? There we go. Sorry. You can also set the light or lighting to be unlit. So you will see there's no lighting being calculated. But this also saves on space because the engine doesn't need to calculate and draw the shadows onto this area. So only use this on areas of the map that players won't see or like behind walls or something else that like once again players won't see. So let's build it back up. The quality of the shadows is inherited by the size of your room slash BSP service. So this one is pretty small, but if you would stretch this room out, which I think I can do to show you what I mean. So let's set it back to 1, save it. That's pretty sharp, but if you stretch this one out, not that way, the other way around. So let's stretch it out more that way and build everything again. You will see the quality is like greatly reduced. So the size of the surface slash geometry matters a lot. So if you want really sharp shadows, you'll need to make sure that your room doesn't get too big, basically. Because as you see, as we scale it back to like how it was, the shadows are fine again. So keep that in mind when you're um, mapping and want at least some decent shadows. What you can also do is um, like stop right there. So cut up your box or cut up your room and then add a new section to that room. And then so it like overlaps with each other. And now we can use this entire new room to like create more detailed shadows because it doesn't have to share the space with this room basically. So you have like a different section, yeah, there we go, um, to create more detailed shadows. So if I like make it smaller, then the shadows would be even sharper basically. Yeah, it's like once again, it's up to you to mess around with it. If you really want detailed lighting, yeah, you should try splitting your rooms up. So you need your main area, and for like areas that you want some nice shadows, and you can either create like a separate um, room for that and then merge it into the existing room like I just did, or add some extra geometry on top of it with the additive button, and then you're also good to go. So what you can do is, if we scale this one back to normal, then you could, like in theory, add a box or add a sheet around this wall and down here to make it more detailed because it's not part of the same geometry slash cube. So let's save the map. Yeah, that would really cover the basics really of lighting. So you know how to make a culvert light, you know how to add a fancy corona to the map, to a light basically. Um, yeah, you know how to control the resolution of the shadows being cast with the light map option. So with services, properties, pan, rotate, scale, and then light map, and so on and so on. Um, well, yeah, one thing I will talk about as well. Um, if you have, for example, a piece of geometry like on the floor or some garbage cans or like something else that you don't want to have or you don't want to have shadows calculated on, you can set the shadow casting of a static mesh or actor to off. So you can't disable shadows on geometry. They always render unless you set it to unlit, obviously, which we talked about before. But if you, for example, I don't want this fence to render shadows or to cast shadows, I go into lighting and then, was it here? No. Sorry, it's on the display, my bad. And then go to shadow cast and then set it to false, rebuild, and you will see it's basically ignored by the raycasting engine slash lighting engine. But yeah, only do this if you really need to optimize your map or have like really small details on the floor that don't really need shadows basically. So you can set them back out again. What you can also do, if, for example, if you have a weapon spawn or weapon pickup base. So let's grab a weapon base, plonk it on the ground. By default, it doesn't cast shadows. So if we build it, it looks flat. This is fine. So, but once again, it's up to your own decision to if you want the extra detail for slightly bigger file size, and so on and so on. But you can enable shadow casting on these as well, and then build the lighting, and you will see there's a shadow being cast around it now. But this surface is not really high detail enough to really show it off. But there you go. There's a shadow around it now. And once again, you can turn it off and it will look flattened again. So you can use it to increase the fidelity, so it doesn't it doesn't feel floating in space basically. So it's actually connected to the surface, but by default it's false. Same thing goes for this one and this one as well. You have the unlit tag for your textures, for your surfaces, but you also have this tag for your meshes or actors in this case. And this one will be set to unlit, and you will see it's basically full bright. So if you set it back to false, then it will accept the lighting again, and it will work as intended. So if you set this one to unlit as well, it's basically full bright, looks horrible, but is ignored. A lighting is ignored on it, so it can speed up rendering as well. So yeah, this is also an optimization trick that you can use to speed up your rendering during gameplay. So yeah, one thing I will quickly show off as well is the rendering modes in game as well. So we talked about the different rendering modes for lighting in the editor, but you can also trigger them in game. So if you go to hit the tilde key which will bring up the console. You can set it to the texture mode slash unlit mode if you type R mode space 6. So you will see no lighting at all, no shadows, no nothing. It's basically the textures only. Can be used handy to quickly check something. For example, if you go back to R mode 5, that is the dynamic lighting mode, so the one we've been using for most of the time during the tutorial. This will bring back all the lighting, as the name would imply, dynamic light mode. And if you go to R mode 7, you will get into the lighting only view, which will only allow you to see the actual lighting. So the textures are disabled, and you will also see, you only see the lighting being cast around here. One thing I forgot to mention, and I will cover that quickly now. So when you build your map, you will get lighting. Cool, great. But as you will notice, there's some pretty bad, yeah, it depends on YouTube compressing it probably, but there's some pretty bad banding. And it's probably best to see in the lighting only mode. You will see there's quite a lot of banding and a lot of compression artifacts basically. And this is because if you go into the build options, it's because the format is set at DXT3, my bad. This is a compression algorithm used by textures as well. It's really good. It's compression is sometimes not noticeable at all, but for lighting it's pretty bad, and it also creates these weird blobs of rainbow colors and other things like that. So it's not really nice. It does reduce the map size for sure, but to be honest, if you would see what it looks like with RGB8, you can ignore DXT1 as well. Just select RGB8 and then build. You'll see a lot more smoother, almost no artifacts, because RGB8 slash TGA basically is almost lossless. And this greatly improves the quality of your lighting. So as you would see, it's a lot more pleasing to look at. The details are a bit sharper as well because there's a lot less artifacting. If you switch back to DXT3, you will see some weird patterns and stuff like that. Save as BMP, it probably does something, but I never found out what it does. And dither, there's like some dithering artifacts that it can help avoid or something like that. Well, you can see the dither pattern basically. Uh, so yeah, I don't see why you would use it. It creates even more issues, like you will see these rainbow green and purple colors everywhere. So basically, don't touch these at all. Just use um, RGB8 if you really want quality. If you think like, ooh, I still need to reduce my file size of the map, use DX33 basically, DXT3. But as you will see, there is a noticeable difference, and you will get artifacting on textures as well. In my personal opinion, RGB8, the file size increase is not big enough to, um, yeah, worth outweigh the extra quality that it gives you. And then again, machines nowadays are fast enough to handle them, and I think even a decently machine from like 2007 will also be able to handle it. But once again, play test your map with friends or family or whoever you can find. Check if their performance is good, and then either change it or change something else. But yeah, like try to get RGB8 as much as possible. And if you really need a smaller size or like better performance, then go to back to DX3. Right, that's where we will call it for today. Yeah, once again, we covered the basics. Why can't I go back now? There we go. We covered the basics. You should be able to give your letter color now, change the radius, add a cool fancy effect to it as well, and other cool stuff like that. In the next tutorial, we will be covering sunlight, because sunlight requires some extra stuff to work and is useful for a map that's outside. So we will cover that, and we'll also cover skyboxes, because, well, looking at walls is cool, but having a fancy, cool skybox to look at as well is also pretty cool. So, yeah, we'll see you again next time.